dangerous part of the public broadcast and reaction here is the self-imposed censorship. When I was in Finland, we were under heavy attack by the government during the spring 2003. One morning, going up the elevator, one of the journalists said to me, "Christian, I have drawn a line in my mind with a plus and a minus. And every time I hear the news on radio or watch the news on television from the DR channel, I'm measuring whether we are broadcasting something on the left or on the right side." And she said, when we as journalists are beginning to reacting like that, this is the first step towards self-censorship. Of course then, to protect the journalists, we have the Stonewall Jackson. That is the Director General. How can the Director General react? I have met a very thorough investigation in how Director Generals have reacted in Europe when they have been put under political pressure. Here you have my typology. Some of them are just carrying on as if nothing happened. They don't even find out that they are under pressure. Others are, appealing to higher justice. This is unfair, you should not do that. Then you have those who really don't take notice. They can't find out. So that's me going down there. That's how I read it. Then you have those fighting back. You have them, it doesn't matter, we can't find it, they just leave. You have them shouting. You have the silent Director Generals. They don't know what to do. They just can't control their temper. Well, there is no standard way of defending public broadcasters. So there are many very important questions you have to discuss with yourself. You must also realize what are you actually defending? Are you defending the core values of public broadcasting, or are you defending your own position? I must admit, being personal, during that battle, I will come later to it, I was sometimes considering, am I fighting back? Am I rejecting to react as the chairman of the board wants, just because I don't want him to interfere? You can have a flexible response. You're saying, like in the British television series, "Yes, Minister," you can say, of course, Mr. Chairman, will do that, then you just don't do anything. You can also make a line in the sand saying, okay, you can interfere to this limit, but you can't pass this limit. Then you can try to make counter alliances. I mean, if you can maneuver in the political landscape, you can try to contact other political parties and try to make some counter forces. Or you can, if you dare, give notice of resignation, and then, having a chairman maybe saying, I don't take this as a threat, it's simply a chance to give me. And you can, of course, resign. By these different tactics, you might be able to win one battle or two battles by good tactics, but you never will win a war. It is interesting that BBC, after the Hutton report in the summer 2003, and the Hutton report being very critical to BBC, the BBC won the battle, not because of government, not because of the Hutton report, because of the British population was on the side of the BBC, because there had been year-long for generation the contract between the BBC and the British audience. And then to the personal account. This is a photograph of the concert hall in the DR building in Copenhagen. Normally is covered by a blue screen, as you see here. In the last couple of months, it has not changed, it's still blue, but this picture has been drawn on the television screens as a branding of a news program or a documentary program in DR called Jagten på de røde lejesvende. In Swedish, Jagten på de røde Lego-knægter, on English Chasing the Red Pirates. It was a program on where a number of journalists in DR, mostly journalists in my age, who were active in the 1970s, and was actually maybe 5 or 6 journalists. Most of them were some kind of left-wing, a few of them were expressively communists. They were interrogated and accused of being communists and so on. They didn't interview the hundreds of journalists who were as most on the right side. That program has caused fantastic discussion and debate. Those who all the time has been convinced that the journalists and the management in DR was left-wing and red, they have been convinced it was correct. Those who have been more on the left, they are really angry. Now I will give you the timeline on what happened in the years between 2001 and 2003 to illustrate some of the mechanisms. In 2001, Denmark got a new government. Normally we shift governments with an interval of 5 to 10 years. There have been a liberal government in the 80s, in the 90s we had a social democratic government, and then in 2001 we had a liberal conservative or centre-right government. A year after, something like the beginning of 2002, they made a new political agreement on public service. Something like the Royal Charter in the UK for a 4-year period, fixing the license fee and so on. There was a couple of new elements in that law. The first one was that this normal 4-year period was cut down, not in the coming 4 years, but they cut the previous period with 1 year, so that the new board took office a year before normally planned. And the other was a new composition of the board, giving the government political parties a stronger influence. So the year after, at the beginning of 2003, a new board with a new chairman took office. And he told me that he was provided by government, by his political party, with a list of 100 issues which would be changed in DR. He didn't tell me what was on the list, only that there was 100 different issues which would change. There were 2 of the issues he mentioned. One was that he or the board or the government wanted the United News Department. Some years previously we had put radio news and television news to one department. The government didn't want that because it was considered too strong, too dominant in the news picture in Denmark. So that should be split up. And the other issue was a number of left-wing journalists should be fired. We had a very open discussion with each other. Later, actually, he and me got very close together. We had, agreement. We didn't. There's actually no conflict. Or anyway, I didn't realize there was a conflict. Then, in the spring 2003, Denmark entered the Iraq War together with the US and UK, or rather the US entered the war together with the UK and Denmark following, and very few other countries. And that is important here to, when Denmark entered the war in Afghanistan, there was agreement in Parliament amongst almost all parties, but in this case, with the Iraq War, there was a very, very tiny majority in Parliament for Denmark joining. There was a huge opposition against it. So it was a very, very controversial political issue. And the government considered DR to be anti-war and anti-government and anti-American. I mentioned this about self-censorship. The people in the news department had, in the months up to the start of the war, rehearsals of what kind of wording could they use, important